Since childhood, many men have been taught to feel ashamed of their own bodies. Solo pleasure came to be seen as something dirty, as if it were a sign of weakness or moral failure. This guilt, often silent, keeps acting from within, disrupting how a man relates to himself, his faith, and even to the person beside him. The tension between what was learned and what is felt in real life becomes a difficult conflict to handle. On one side, tradition and the weight of religious rules. On the other, the reality of the body, desire, and emotional health. This video addresses the topic with clarity and respect. It brings to light what is and what is not written in the Bible without distortions. And it also shows what science has already proven about the effects of masturbation on physical, mental, and sexual health. Those who have ever felt torn between guilt and need will find here a balanced perspective without condemnation, but also without trivialization. The path begins when you understand what is real, what was inherited, and what can be consciously rebuilt. Take a moment now to check if you're already subscribed to the channel. There's always content made especially for men over 50, focusing on health, vitality, and quality of life. If this video resonated with you, hit the like button. It really helps this message reach the men who need it most. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Type 1 if you found the topic important, or 0 if you'd like to suggest something new. This channel is yours too. There are married men who feel more guilty about masturbating than about lying to their wives. And what's worse, many don't even know where that guilt comes from. It's like a weight placed long ago, maybe from something a father said, a religious leader preached, or a comment thrown into a TV show. They grow up believing masturbation is ugly, dirty, wrong, and when desire arises, the mind becomes a battlefield. The body wants it, but the mind says no. This creates a conflict that doesn't show on the outside, but eats away from within. Some men hide even from themselves, afraid of seeming weak. Others are ashamed to tell their wives, as if it were betrayal. This silence only feeds anxiety, sadness, and even difficulty maintaining a healthy sex life. Hypocrisy also shows up. Many judge others while doing the same in secret. This isn't about defending a habit at all costs. It's about realizing that the problem isn't the act itself, but the way it's treated. Constantly repressing natural desire with guilt can do more harm than the act itself ever could. If this topic has already touched you in some way, it's worth taking one step further. In my digital book, Rediscovering Intimacy, Healthy Sexuality After 60, I dive deeper into themes like guilt, desire, pleasure, and emotional connection, all with clear language, respect, and practical guidance. It's content designed especially for those who want to live their sexuality with more freedom without fighting their own history. The link is in the pinned comment. If you feel it's time to take better care of your intimate life and transform your relationship with your body, this book could be the beginning. When science began to study masturbation seriously, it put myths aside and started observing what really happens in the human body. And what they discovered was surprising for those who grew up hearing that it was harmful. Research shows that masturbation helps release hormones like dopamine and oxytocin, which are responsible for relaxation, pleasure, and a sense of well-being. It's like a natural tranquilizer with no side effects, as long as it doesn't become an escape from every problem. Men who practice in moderation, for example, are at lower risk of developing prostate cancer. That's right, balanced ejaculation frequency is linked to prostate health according to studies published in respected medical journals. And the benefits don't stop there. The eye practice can also improve sleep quality, relieve accumulated tension, and even increase control over one's own body. When done consciously, masturbation can become a form of self-awareness. A person begins to understand their limits, preferences, and rhythms better that reflects positively in their partnered sex life. In other words, it's not about addiction or shame. It's about health taken seriously based on evidence, not hearsay. The idea that masturbation is a sin didn't appear out of nowhere. It was built over centuries, blending religious interpretations, cultural traditions, and a great deal of sexual repression. In ancient times, any act not directly tied to reproduction was viewed with suspicion. Pleasure for its own sake was treated as something dangerous, something that diverted a man from his spiritual path, and that idea spread, passed down from generation to generation as an unquestioned truth. In religious institutions, many leaders associated sexual desire with moral weakness, and masturbation, being a solitary and intimate act, became an easy target. In some historical periods, the practice was even linked to disease, physical decline, or divine punishment. It was easier to impose fear than to explain things clearly. Over time, this rigid view blended into popular culture. That well-known phrase, "that's nasty boy," turned into a shame that followed thousands of men into adulthood. And the most curious part, many carry that guilt without ever having truly read what Scripture says. So, it's not just about faith, but also about tradition and long-held silence. It's common to hear that the Bible condemns masturbation. But when you open the sacred text carefully, you notice something interesting. There is no direct passage on the topic. What you find are verses about purity, sexual morality, and fidelity, but none that specifically mentions solo pleasure. For example, 1 Corinthians 7:2 talks about avoiding immorality through marriage. Hebrews 13:4 highlights the importance of keeping the marriage bed pure. But in none of these cases is masturbation explicitly referenced. A large part of the condemnation comes from interpretations, some ancient, others more recent, that place masturbation in the same category as impurities. However, these interpretations vary greatly depending on the religious group, the historical period, and even the local culture. The same verse can be read in completely different ways by different communities. What this reveals is that many concepts tied to sin have been shaped more by tradition and social norms than by objective passages from Scripture. Understanding this is not about disrespecting faith, but rather seeking clarity on what is actually written and what was simply added over time. The same text can generate completely different rules depending on who interprets it. That's what happens with masturbation. While some religions treat the act as impure, others avoid condemnation and prefer silence. There is no consensus. Even within Christianity, some churches see masturbation as sinful, while others consider it part of human nature as long as it doesn't interfere with the couple's life or become compulsive behavior. In Islam, for instance, some scholars allow it in specific cases, such as when it prevents a greater sin. In Eastern traditions like Taoism, pleasure may even be seen as a way to balance body and mind if practiced with awareness and moderation. In other words, it all depends on the perspective of the one teaching. And it's not just religion that shapes these ideas. Local culture plays a big role too. In more open societies, masturbation is treated naturally. In others, it remains taboo. The same act in different contexts can be seen as healthy, shameful, or forbidden. This shows that judgment doesn't always come from Scripture, but from what each society chooses to value or suppress. For a long time, talking about masturbation was almost exclusively a male subject. Women were taught not to think about their own bodies as if pleasure didn't belong to them. Today, with greater access to information, that perspective is changing. Masturbation isn't a male practice, it's human. Both men and women benefit from self-touch when it happens consciously and without guilt. For men, it helps with ejaculation control, increases body awareness, and reduces daily stress. For women, it can relieve cramps, reduce anxiety, and improve natural lubrication. But beyond the physical effects, the emotional impact also matters. People who know themselves tend to respect themselves more, feel less guilt, and relate better to others. There are even couples who include masturbation as part of their shared sex life to explore preferences, rhythms, and limits in a light, pressure-free way. When treated with maturity, this practice stops being seen as a solitary failure and becomes a tool that strengthens intimacy. And that applies at any age. Pleasure doesn't need to be hidden. It can be cared for, respected, and lived with balance. Between the extremes of repression and unchecked excess, there is a middle ground that many people ignore. Masturbation, like any other human behavior, can be healthy or harmful depending on the frequency, context, and intention behind it. When used as an escape from everything, stress, boredom, frustration, it can become an automatic habit that brings no real pleasure or satisfaction. And when it is entirely repressed due to fear or guilt, it can cause emotional blocks and built-up tension. The problem is not in the act itself, but in the way it's lived. Some masturbate once a day and are at peace with it with no harm. Others do it a few times a month and also feel fine. What matters is the relationship each person has with their body and their pleasure. If the habit interferes with your routine, your social life, or your desire within the relationship, it's worth pausing and reflecting. The search for balance involves inner listening, respect for your own limits, and if needed, professional guidance. Not everything has to be all or nothing. Between ashamed silence and excess, there's a path where pleasure can coexist with health and peace of mind. After everything we've covered, it's clear the problem was never pleasure itself, but the guilt built around it. Many carry this burden silently, not knowing that part of the weight comes from old distorted interpretations, not from real wrongdoing. When faith meets knowledge, the freedom to live your sexuality with more awareness, respect, and balance is born. Now tell me, had you ever realized that the Bible doesn't directly mention masturbation, but that many people suffer as if they were disobeying a clear command? I really want to know your thoughts. Share them in the comments. If this content was helpful to you, click the like button. That helps the video reach more men who, like you, want to better understand their bodies and live with more ease. There are other videos on this channel that talk about sexual guilt, intimate health, and desire in later life. If you want to continue this journey of self-knowledge with solid information, it's worth watching the next ones. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything.